top pollutants in the world.
Well, carbon is interesting. Carbon dioxide is interesting because it's clear, it's odorless, and it's not toxic. So there's really no motivation for a wealthy country to not produce it. If carbon dioxide, so what did we used to use for transportation before cars?
We use horses
carriages.
And what kind of waste do horses make when they expend energy?
poop.
Right. So if that was what carbon
Fertilizer,
dioxide was like,
manure.
I don't think we'd be emitting it anymore, right? But because it's clear, it doesn't smell, we can't even tell it's here. It's hard to think about it in your everyday. And so a lot of countries that actually are the most developed countries, like the U.S. or like Europe.
Beijing has a very bad pollution problem.
Yeah, but that's a little bit separate from their carbon dioxide problem. They have a very
Yes.
bad carbon dioxide problem too. But that's why a place that you would think of as not polluted potentially, like England or some, I'm thinking of our very wealthy countries in the Middle East, their carbon footprint is huge because it's not affecting their quality of life to have carbon. But they might not have that dirty, sooty air that you see in Beijing or in India, the places that don't have as much resources to use better technologies.
What would be interesting is if we could turn have something that could turn carbon dioxide into something that actually smelled
Right.
or did something.
Or it was,
to
bright red or something
kind
like
of just
that. Right?
cause a problem so
Yeah.
that people would actually take action against
Right.
it. It'd be interesting if they made something like that.
But then every time we breathe, it would be something terrible, right? Because we exhale carbon dioxide every time we breathe.
Like
It's all around
like
us.
that myth that parents say, don't pee in the pool or else it'll be bright red. Don't breathe or else you'll show that you're breathing.
Right.
You're emitting carbon dioxide. You're part of the problem.
Right. Or a natural part of the carbon
yes.
cycle. Right? Yeah.
So, what do you think is the most polluted state in the country? How do you think they can change that?
Wow.
And why?
That's a tough question. If you did pollution by person or if you did pollution total, it would be very different. If you did pollution total, it's probably California. But there's so many people. So if you compared California to Wyoming, it's going to be much more polluted, right? Because there's so many more people in California that are driving cars and eating food and doing all kinds of things.
Just like comparing California to Delaware.
Right. Whereas Delaware's pretty polluted. But they have a lot of industry in Delaware.
Well, it's like comparing California to Rhode Island. Rhode Island is a very,
very
small
small.
state near the ocean that doesn't have a lot of people in it.
Right.
Well, it has a lot of people in it, but from the standpoint of California compared to...
You could a good comparison would really extreme would be like Vermont and California. Vermont is the second least populated state, and there's really not a lot of industry, but people have to drive long distances to get wherever they want to go in Vermont because things are spread out. So per person, there are actually really nice maps of this. They go by zip code. Per person, how much carbon do people make? And if you look at that map, the suburbs have the highest carbon footprint, the cities have the lowest, and the countryside has even higher. So if you were to do it by person, a state that's mostly countryside like Wyoming, even though Wyoming has the fewest people of any state in the country, to get to the grocery store, if you live in Wyoming, you might have to drive a truck through the snow for a really long distance. Whereas in Portland, you can just walk to the store. But then at the
Just
same...
walk to the store down the street.
Exactly. But then Portland has a lot of pollution because we have a lot of people. So I don't think I answered your question. But I don't know if I have an answer. California
You
probably has
asked
the
the
most
question.
pollution. Texas is probably also a very polluted state. Lots of people. California has the best pollution regulations to reduce pollution. Texas probably has some of the worst. So in that sense, maybe Texas would be a bad one. New York has big cities, so you'd have a lot of problems in a place like New York too.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting comparing it because most people would just assume oh, if you live in the countryside, you live all organic and natural, but then they don't take into consideration that if you live in the countryside, isolated from a lot of things, and you have to drive a lot,
Right.
that can be more polluting than big cities where they actually have factories
Yeah,
and stuff.
per person at least. But if you were concerned about breathing clean air, you'd be better in the
Yeah.
countryside probably.
Yes.
But big cities and states that don't have good regulations are probably the worst places to be. So Texas would be one, maybe Tennessee, big cities in Tennessee or Florida. Those are places that have, but it's very variable too, because if you have that lid on your atmosphere like we have here in Portland or they have in Los Angeles all the time, then no matter what you do, you have a lot of pollution because everything sits there. Whereas Miami, which might produce a lot of pollution, always has sea breezes that blow it out. Same with New York City, blows it out to sea. So it's a very difficult question to answer. Someone's probably measured it, but not me.
Here, what organization do you think is helping the most in the prevention of climate change?
Portland State University. No.
Me.
That's a good question. Let me think about that for a minute. I mean, I'm sort of biased towards science institutions that are trying to learn about the problem and better ways to solve it. So in that sense, NASA is a really good one. NASA builds all these satellites that measure what's going on the Earth. It can measure carbon dioxide movement throughout the Earth. So that's a really good one. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Association, which is NOAA. That's another really good one. They monitor the climate and the weather. They have an excellent educational resource page called climate.gov. If you're looking for more information, it's a really good website. So I think organizations that fund gaining of additional knowledge on both the science side and then technology side are really powerful. The Department of Energy is another one, surprisingly. Right? The Department of Energy is in charge of energy. To make energy, we make pollution. But as a result, they also fund an awful lot of work on how to make that better. So the Department of Energy is a good one, and they fund a lot of good science too. There are also nonprofits and other environmental groups that do a lot of good things, but I'm much more I'm much more favorable towards the more scientific points of view. Maybe that's my personal bias because that's where the world that I live in. But
yeah, so it's good to have both, but like in order to be able to do like protests and like spread awareness, you have to like have the facts.
Right, and needs to be some good, educated people to do that because scientists aren't usually the best ones to do that. We can produce the information, but not only are we not usually good at it, most of us don't want to go and protest. It's sort of in conflict with what we're doing sometimes. So there's some do. So those groups that can do that, it's 350.org, I think, is a pretty good group.
We actually got information on 350.org. I've been looking at their website a lot, and they have a really good The Science
Yeah,
page.
they're pretty well informed.
Yeah.
As far as other groups that sort of work on action, Climate Central is a good organization. They sort of do a little bit of both. They're in San Francisco and in Princeton, New Jersey. They're a really good group too.
Website.
Probably just climatecentral.org, I would guess.
Yeah, well, we need like both kinds of people, like people who are able to do like the investigations and other people who can like make it heard.
Right, absolutely.
Have it heard and like take it to like the government,
Yep.
like to like a higher priority. Take it to a
Right.
higher priority and spread
know
awareness.
how to communicate. That's really important. Those groups that can really communicate well are really important. I think 350.org has done a pretty decent job at doing that. And they have, I'm really bad with names, but I think the guy who's in charge of them is a really charismatic, very calm, level communicator. I like those who don't get really angry and scream a lot. You sort of keep calm and work on the information
I feel the same way.
right. Anyone can go yell and scream, right? But it takes a real
do this,
right.
or this will happen.
right, real talented person to make people listen and care without getting angry or using, harsh language or anything like that. You're more likely to get someone to listen to you that way.
Because like if you're like forcing someone to do this, it's like people won't really care.
That's right.
And they won't do anything like later after you like stop yelling at them and
Right.
they're like and
That's
you're
sort
like
of
not
human
looking
nature,
and
right?
then-
You just want to
yeah.
turn around and say, no more. I don't want to listen to you.
Whereas, like, if you explain to them, like, the problem and, like, make them see how important it is, that would be a better
Right,
way.
right. Yeah, you want to be their friend. That's the best way to do it. Don't be enemies.
And has anyone you ever know had, like, lung cancer or any other sickness caused by, like, air pollution?
No, it's really hard in the United States to say that someone's disease was caused by air pollution because it's just a difficult thing to show. In places that are extremely polluted, like China and India, it might be easier to say that, but the pollution in the U.S. isn't high enough that you can easily say this person's disease was caused by that. There's only a few things that have that high enough disease-causing power. So, for example, like smoking. We don't know for sure if you got lung cancer and you're a smoker that you wouldn't have gotten lung cancer if you didn't smoke. But smoking probably had something to do with that. But air pollution itself, it's a really difficult thing to pin down. Even in places like people who live nearby the glass factory, the statistics on how much their health is affected by that, it's still really hard to make big judgments about, because you may have a 5% increase in cancer over like a big area or something like that. And it's really hard to say what the root cause of that was. So no, I haven't known anyone personally, but we do know that if you're exposed to certain air pollution for a very long time, or as children in particular too, it can increase risks for disease. But again, it's no guarantee. It's not, like, oh, if you're breathing this, you're going to get sick. It's still pretty unlikely. But if you're living in parts of industrial China or industrial India, it can have a real impact on your health, especially on things like asthma. Sort of these more short-term things, pollution can really aggravate asthma. And that actually can happen in the U.S. too. If you have, like, a calm winter night when everyone's got wood fires going, it smells so nice, right? But all that smoke is just sort of sitting in your neighborhood. That sort of thing can really cause things like asthma to be activated, or being around people smoking cigarettes or something like that.
That's why, like, a lot of people get sick in the wintertime. Also because it's, like, really cold outside and, like, germs are just kind of floating around and stuff.
We're stuck inside with enclosed, no open windows.
Yeah, it's just like we're stuck inside, crammed together with people who might be sick.
Right. Yeah.
Got anything to add?
Do you support any organizations that are trying to support climate change, such as 350, Climate Central, and Climate.gov, NOAA?
I hope NOAA supports me. I'm not involved specifically with any sort of activist organization at all. But those that do it responsibly, I'm certainly in support of. So, the efforts of groups like 350.org are really good. Climate Central is excellent, and I'm sure there are more that are. So actually, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change is this giant global international organization that's really good. That's part of the United Nations, and they're sort of the gold standard of climate information. Every 7 to 10 years or so, they put out a definitive report, and the last one was in 2013, that summarizes, this report's like this thick, all of the climate science that's happened in the last 10 years or so, and then they also have whole chapters on policy. They make summaries so that policymakers can interpret all this information. So they're really, really, really excellent. It's one of the most carefully done activities in climate world. So I like these groups that have the scientists, but they have those who are also policy experts talking to politicians, and they work together to sort of translate all the numbers and things that we produce with error bars and graphs and things, try to take that and make it something that a politician who's actually making regulations might be able to understand. So those tend to, again, be less in the activist world, but they sort of give the information that a group like 350.org would need to do what it does. So I support those efforts a lot. I get a little less supportive when there's, like I said, a lot of sort of us versus them we're enemies of you, or, you know, things like that, because that just tends to perpetuate a lot of